So it's going to be a fun panel. We are going to do rapid fire, quick questions where we tell all the truth about motorsports, sports, soccer, statistics, hockey, and find out all about these amazing women. So the first question is around introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about the challenges you've faced during your career in sports and your background. And why don't we start with Allie?
Hey, everyone. So I played soccer for a very long time, 10 years with the U.S. Women's National Team, competed in 2 Olympics, 2 World Cups. And then after I retired and stepped away from the game a bit, I was drawn back into the announcing side, the broadcast side of the sport, and was an announcer in the 2015 Women's World Cup. And then pushed myself into the men's side of broadcasting. So I did some of those events, ultimately became the first woman to call a men's World Cup game in 2018, and then was the lead analyst for the Women's World Cup in 2019. So I work for Fox Sports, I work for CBS now, and concurrently, and with that, I am the lead analyst for the NWSL, which is the Women's Professional League here in the United States. So seen a lot, I would say, through that experience or those experiences, a lot of highs and lows, but that's my story.
So just give us 1 or 2 challenges that speculatively you might have faced during your career, since we're talking about challenges in women and sports and technology as well.
Yeah, I would say, a couple things in my career outside of the injuries that I faced, and learning to control what I can control. I would say the biggest challenge for me as an athlete was being a strong woman and being in a team environment and having, wanting to, I would say, be vocal and be heard when you a lot of times were up against maybe coaches that weren't as self-confident and didn't deal with, personality players on a team and didn't like that, in fact, and it's a fine line between, I think, speaking up and then knowing your role in a group. And so navigating that, especially being so young, I mean, I burst onto the U.S. national team as an 18-year-old. So, I was one of the younger ones in the Meghan, Brandy Chastain era, and then continued on into like that Abby Wambach era, Carly Lloyd, of course. So I would say like understanding how to play that role and do it well. I never got to it when I was an athlete. I would say now in broadcasting, it's much easier. They want you to be yourself and have a personality. But the challenges that I face in this industry is, I had to speak up to say, hey, put me in the men's side of the game. In 2015, getting to do or 2016, do the Confed Cup, and then, or Copa America, it was actually Centenario. It was here in the US, and then the Confed Cup. So they would never have thought of doing that if I didn't ask our head producer to put me in that role, and then ultimately land in the, men's World Cup and break some barriers along the way. But still, I fight for, I would say, my gigs to a certain extent. And I fight for, I have very different contracts than the men. And I'm the lead analyst on the women's side. The counterpart on the men's side has a very different contract for me right now, at the different networks that I work for. So that is still a struggle, but I'm content. I have triplets that are 8, and I have a 5-year-old girl. So there's that fine line again between pushing for too much and being too busy and doing too much and not, enjoying the home life. So those are all I would say, the things that I've navigated and actually still doing so.
Thank you. That's great. Meghan, let's go to you. Tell us a little bit about your career in sports and then challenges you faced. And I know your career has also been on the entrepreneurial side, so I'm sure you'll give us a few nuggets there.
For sure. And I would say, Allie, you are my hero for triplets. That is amazing. Like, being a mother, it blows my mind what moms do with just 1 kid. So 3, I can't imagine. But yeah, I'm Meghan Chayka. I started a sports tech company. We mainly do hockey analytics. We work worldwide in various leagues, teams, players, trainers. Pretty typical like startup experience, except we know a lot of startups are very male dominated too. So being in sports and hockey, and then my other foot in tech, it's very interesting to see compare, contrast, sort of take energy from where I can and move on. I also teach. I'm a data scientist in residence at one of the largest universities in Canada. So, hold my own in academia on my spare time. Challenges, I guess, just like feeling like you belong. I do kind of juggle a few different roles in terms of what I do. So, it's hard walking into rooms and always seeing men. I think it just sort of wears you down after a while. And just seeing yourself within those roles or moving up in those sort of organizations where, there's a very distinct culture and maybe you don't really fit or like that culture. I feel like that's very difficult. And then also finding mentors. I found some good ones, and then I get to a different, area of my career, and just like, I feel like it's difficult as a woman to feel like you belong and to set great boundaries and have really great professional relationships as you move through the rungs of your career. There's a lot of challenges there for women.
That's great. Thank you. Neda, good to see you, by the way.
You too, Susan, Ali, and Meghan. Honestly, it's great to just be in this virtual panel with you. I'm Neda Tabatabaie. I'm the VP of Business Analytics and Technology for the San Jose Sharks. I've been with the Sharks for 6 years. I'm from Toronto. Meghan and I know each other, from there. I started working in the sports industry in 2005 for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, owner of Leafs, Raptors, and other sports properties in Toronto. And then from there, moved to New York, went to the other side of the sports teams, working more as a vendor. And then 6 years ago, I ended up in the Bay Area. Challenges, in every part of my career, I've had different challenges. It's part of growth. When I was, a coordinator on MLSC and talking about data and everybody thought I'm crazy, I had challenges. Right now, I have different types of challenges. So that's part of that. I think going back to what Ali and Meghan was saying is that in general, the challenges in our industry is cultural. You hear it in the news more and more these days, from the experience of female athletes like Ali, or the recent news from NWSL, to the sexist, homophobic, racist language that you hear sometimes that is spoken, to the experience of front office people that you hear from some other sports teams. Those are all cultural challenges. Don't get me wrong, though, we do have a lot of great parts in our culture in the sports industry. Otherwise, honestly, I wouldn't have stayed on. But there are a lot of us that are constantly working every day because we acknowledge that we have a good culture that can get much better. And it goes from how fans are treated, how front office people are treated, who are even in the front office and, making decisions, to especially the female athletes. So that's, I would say, is the broader umbrella into everything, but we are changing. And a lot of us, male, female, transgender athletes, front office people, everybody's working to make sure we are making changes and making our industry better, because we're all passionate about sports.
Thank you. I'll introduce myself. I'm more of the business person, have run a number of companies. The first one that I ran when I moved here from France 15 years ago was SB Forum. So it's wonderful to be back on an SB Forum program. We ran the first sports tech conference in the Bay Area, actually, many, many years ago. And having been a sports junkie, I was a college athlete. So I go back to the time when we actually had to do car washes to pay for gas to go to games. So things have changed and they're better, ladies. Let's, look on the positive side, right? Forget about getting pay and, who wanted our names on anything. I have 4 daughters. I don't have triplets, but I do have twins. They were all college athletes, and one of them is on one of the U.S. national teams now. So I do see it on both sides of the coin, both how people get into a career in sports as an athlete and then how they move on. And in the work that I've done and my interest in changing the playing field for women, Neda and I are both on the board of Women in Sports Tech, which is a fantastic not-for-profit that started a few years ago to help women get fellowships and change the ratio in the sports tech industry. And then just recently I stepped in to help accelerate the growth of a foundation focused on getting women and people of color into the motorsports industry. And I'll just say that soccer is one thing. We took a group of girls from Oakland to Laguna Seca for a race, 27 drivers, all white men. So I rest my case. there's a lot of change that needs to happen. In terms of challenges, I think the challenges are very much what you've all said. They are cultural. They're challenges for athletes. They're challenges about pay. But in any organization, you have to put your right foot forward and be positive about it. Otherwise, it'll kill you. So let's go on to the next topic, which is, you know, the world has changed so much, and it's pretty boring to even say it. But in the world of sports and entertainment in particular, what would each of you say has changed since January 2020 in the world of sports and the world of sports tech? And I'll start with you, Neda, to give us an example of something positive that's happened, and then something that's either negative or has brought the needle back for the sports world. And then if it's relevant to women, let's talk about women.
So we were one of the first counties that went into lockdown. I remember Wednesday at the end of the day, we sent everybody home. And then Thursday, Friday, we're like, oh, you got to work from home for 2 weeks. 18 months later, I think the first day I came back to the office, right now, we are still doing hybrid, and we're going to continue to hybrid. It was after Labor Day. You know, of course, we held games in the meantime last season here, but it's just, we have been chained to our location, our ice facilities. As a person who works for a sports team, either our ice facilities or our arena, things happen in this building. We come to this building, everything used to be in-person, meetings, conferences, everything. And of course, the games, concerts, all of our events were in person. And then suddenly we ended up at home. So just think about my team also. Of course, IT team is part of my group. So just think about everything we had to do to make sure people can work from home. You know, what we thought was 2 weeks. For sports industry that is very old school, that was a challenge. We actually were in a really good shape. Everybody pretty much was able to do so. So that was a sense of pride. What we did, though, that I think is going to transform the organization, and this has somewhat, was we were challenged with, how are you going to come out of this better? This will end at some point. We thought it's going to be next month, you know, but what are you going to do that's going to have a long-term impact in the organization? So we really did go through some of the technology and sort of a cultural transformation. We started looking at all of our technology stack, from the phone system that we are using to our HRIS system, to our, you know, brought in a new data warehouse. So all of these things that we started to put in place was, and even I reviewed our overall infrastructure. Like a lot of other organizations, we had systems that were legacy, limited integration, not talking to each other, you know, data silos, a lot of people spending a lot of time entering manual data, import, export, all of these other things. And we really started looking at the employee experience. We were traditionally focused on fan experience, which is of course a huge part of the focus, but our employee experience in many times were not necessarily a focus for the organization. So what are the people within the organization doing with technology or better processes that is going to make their life easier so they can be more impactful and they can have a, you know, happier work life? So that's really what we did. That was transformational, and it's going to continue. I hope it really does continue. In terms of negative, I think, you know, and one of the things we have been cognizant about is just, and I'm sure everybody is, it's just people's mental health. You know, there's just a lot of challenges there that everybody's been going through. There are days that I've been super happy. There are days that I was like, I can't even get out of bed. So just being cognizant of that was, it wasn't maybe the negative part of this experience, but we've also learned to just pay more attention to our mental health. And honestly, sometimes give yourself a break. Be like, yeah, you know, it's a pandemic. I'm stuck in home for, you know, forever. Also acknowledge the fact that we were privileged to keep our jobs. But yeah.
That's great, Neda. I'd like to unpack just before I go on to the other panelists, because I think each of you will have comments. Your point about mental health is really, really important. And I think particularly in sports in the past year, whether it has been in tennis or some of the documentaries that have been on television, The Weight of Gold just being one of many, really interesting. Would you associate that dialogue that's happening, particularly with the pandemic? How would you, if you wanted to expand on it a little bit? I think it's a really interesting, you know, for whatever reasons, we're talking about it a lot, and that's good.
I remember when DeMar DeRozan actually started talking about, you know, I work with the Raptors. I'm still a huge DeMar DeRozan fan. He's a basketball player, for those of you who don't know, right now, actually playing for Chicago. He started talking about mental health, and a couple of other male athletes came forward, and it was sort of a little bit like, are we really talking about this? A few years ago, one of our broadcasters, who is a Sharks alumni, Jamie Baker, he actually came out very publicly about his mental health challenges, and he was crying on TV. But, he also talked about the steps that he's taking, being grateful, writing down his journal, like all the things that he's doing. So it started sort of, I think, opening things up. But it's a very difficult topic for people to talk about. We did put programs in place that, employees can can call somebody right away if they are in need of mental health. We did shut down the office several times, 24 hours, everything off, so people can take care of their mental health, because it's really, I think everybody just talking about it more is very helpful, but also you have to really take the steps. So you see a lot of, campaigns and marketing campaigns, but you really have to just go to the uncomfortable places, especially with everything that was going on in social justice movements. Some of our employees were very impacted by that. We were all very upset. So you just have to not only talk about it and acknowledge it, but also put steps in place to address it and help people. I was listening to Adam Grant yesterday, and he was saying it's okay, we call in sick, it's okay to call in sad. And, that to me sounds great. It's a cultural shift.
Wow, thank you. That's great. Meghan, tell us what you've seen as what's changed in the past year and a half, and then if you have anything to add to Neda's comments and perspective on mental health and well-being, that would be great.
Yeah, I think it's great that that's acknowledged, and Damar is like a perfect example of someone who was very quiet as well as an athlete. So it was just earth-shattering for him to be so vulnerable, and I think that really opened the door for now. Even in hockey, we're seeing hockey players take time off, and it's for mental health and to take care of themselves. And I think that's an issue too when you look at like startups or even in office culture. Is it's great to have flex time and to have work from home, but now you don't have separation from your work, right? You're at home thinking, should I be on Slack? Should I take those calls? So giving your employees the space to say, it's okay to take time for yourself, to take time off, to take a vacation, to go for a walk outside. You don't have to be on 24/7, because I think you can commoditize employees or people you work with. And there's that lack of empathy when you don't see them at the water cooler, when you can't have lunch with them, or, you can't give handshakes even, right, during COVID times, or see someone smile. It's very difficult. So I think that's something that as we get back to our offices a bit more, it's still pretty bad in Toronto. We're, not able to do a ton. We've been very restricted. So that will be something that I think will help in especially with extroverts. And I think as a boss, as a manager, knowing your employees and what fills them up, what drains them is important too, to, just help the morale of people moving forward and moving out of COVID. Now, I will say the positives are that we can have, I think we've really leaned into flex time. We've figured out technologies that we can connect. There's no reason now. I call my family out west that I, hadn't seen for years, and now we're on Zooms together and doing stuff. And, we weren't doing that before COVID, which is crazy. So I think necessity is the mother of invention. We've moved forward as a business 5 years ahead. I think that technology part and infrastructure, you're able to step back and make those big changes because you have to, right? You can't connect with fans, you can't connect with clients like you typically do. So there's been a lot of innovation in this time, but I think being mindful of, the negativities of innovation and technology too, and making sure we keep that human connection is really important moving forward.
Thanks, that's great. That's really helpful. Ali, we've given you lots of time to think about this. Have at it. Any piece you want to take on.
Yeah, I would just say in parallel with what both Neda and Meghan mentioned, you're seeing a lot of the mental health issues being addressed by some of the organizations. We're seeing at the US soccer level, where this has never been the case before. Players would never skip a national team camp. They would never say, I can't come in, I need space for myself to work on things. And that's happening. And they were very clear that the tolls of like being cohorted, together at the Olympics, that was part of the reason that they really didn't come together as a team. So there are those challenges, I think, since 2020 that, you don't know how to navigate until you get into them, and they recognize that they really didn't do it right. So And those are some of the sporting elements that I see on the mental health side. You have, players say things like, we work on our fitness. And again, this was never addressed before in my era. And as long as I can remember, you get as fit as you can. You never stop getting fit. You continue to work on your fitness. And the same is, for mental health. A lot of these players now have access to that resource, someone that can, shed light on, their state of being, steps they can take, but they're not done after one session, after 5 sessions, and it's actually continuing to do the work to stay in a really good place mentally. So that's some of the positives I do think that have actually come out of COVID for some of these athletes and for teams. From a broadcasting perspective, a lot shifted technologically, as you can imagine, where we weren't traveling to venues. And I think it really sped up what was inevitable. And that was a lot of remote productions. We were doing it initially, but it became really the only way to be able to put on shows and to cover the sports during the heightened period. Now we're getting a little bit more back into, sometimes we'll go to the venues, but there was, I think, just a massive shift in the resources put towards remote production, which is a good and a bad thing for me as an analyst, because now I can stay home with my family and cover games and do hits from home and cover the sport and bring attention to it, especially, and that's what I'd love to talk about on the women's side. We have to do more of, because that's not happening. But to be able to cover, the sports from home when I'm also able to be a mother, but then I'm also not as good as I would be if I was at a venue and able to see what's happening on the pitch, feel the environment, get that energy across to the audience, and really, I think, pay heed to the special things that the players are doing on the pitch. So you lose that connection, you lose that, I would say, energy, excitement, you lose your ability to analyze as well as you would if you were at the game, but trade that off with more family time, less travel, maybe more time spent, taking care of the mental health aspect. So I do have more, I would say, balance in that regard, but it is also, like you guys said, Meghan and Neda, that ability to turn off, because now I can cover everything. Now I literally can, yes, I can talk about the Champions League game that happened. Yes, I can talk about Serie A. Yes, I can talk about the NWSL. So knowing when to say no. And saying, no, these are the areas that I want to focus in on. So it's a positive and a negative, I would say, kind of the progression that we saw happen in broadcasting over the past year and a half.
And if we were just to unpack that a little bit, could you point to, is there a single innovation or technology or something that allowed this to happen? Is there something, when we would think about, the World Series or Tokyo or, right, how did the broadcasting world manage sports as entertainment during that period? Was there something new and different that you did, or was it simply working 24/7?
No, I think it was more literally the wires that were there that they had to lay the cables for, to be able to get the feeds back in real time, to be able, a lot of these broadcasters actually will call games from their own home. So just that actual infrastructure set up, that massively shifted and allowed, people to cover their sport differently, I would say. But as far as, I want to get into the women's game and why it's not covered and why we need to at some point, but the technology's there, the information's there. Now it's about, getting people, I think, to care and to continue to put stock and value in it the way that we do on the men's side. But that's just a little sidebar.
Well, why don't we talk about that sidebar for 2 minutes, and then we'll get into some questions, because there's, WNBA right now, how many people are watching? Women's soccer, how many people are watching? What would your 2 cents be on that topic?
Yeah, that it's still a massively untapped market. I mean, you've seen what's probably happened abroad, and if any of you are familiar, the top division in women's football in England, they finally just got like a premier contract with the BBC, and they're hitting 1 million viewers for all their shows that they're broadcasting. We're not doing that yet here. We're going to cover the championship game in the NWSL on CBS, but with that, we're 3 games, I believe, we're on the major network. Everything else is on, CBS Sports Network, Paramount Plus, Twitch. And then, you know, I'm making strides within CBS to say, hey, let's do weekly hits on this. Let's cover it. You know, you cover all these others. Let's cover this. Let's get information out there, get people to know that there's a League A, and then why they should care, B. And so there's still such a void in the coverage. ESPN, here's a great example for you. ESPN, when we were back, the NWSL property was back with Lifetime. ESPN was part of that family. ESPN has ESPN, they have ESPNW. This was their own property. And they weren't even putting the scores at the ticker tape at the bottom. There were no articles. There was no coverage on it. It was literally showing up on game day and disappearing on game day. And that was it. We checked a box. We have women's sports. And there was no ancillary programming around it that obviously elevates any sport that we watch. You know, so there's still a fight. There's still a challenge that we have. I do think it's shifting, especially with the new ownership groups that are coming into the NWSL. They've got pull. They get the bigger market. They get how to activate around it. And it's just a matter of time before I think it gets the eyeballs that it's due.
Well, we have two hockey fans here, and I can't help but ask them the same question, because I remember going to, you know, Canada-US women's hockey game a couple of years ago. And it was probably, I don't know, 80% women and girls, probably average age 15. I could be exaggerating, but you know, same problem in hockey. Amazing women hockey players. What's going on? Give us your thoughts. Neda, why don't I start with you? And Meghan, you're our stat queen, so we will expect you to give us the truth.
To me, it's the exact same problem that Ali mentioned. Of course, you know, the Women's Hockey League, they had some issues, and now they've restructured and even made the name more inclusive. So I'm really hopeful for that. But you need sponsor dollars. These are the sports that are actually have the highest rate of growth if you look at the numbers. And Meghan might have those numbers. You know, I don't have them in front of me right now. WAN, NWSL, women's hockey, several other sports that were female athletes, the rate of growth in viewership, sponsorship dollars, and future growth opportunities is the highest rate. And some of the new owners that are coming into the NWSL, and even this sort of some of the structural changes you're seeing in WNBA is really acknowledging that. But you need sponsor dollars, you need owners that are willing to put the funding into it, and the broadcast rights. There are also stats, not, you know, perhaps in the last month, that the WNBA games, I think it was which game was I was actually watching that had the highest rating. It was on one of the major networks so far. So if it's there, people are gonna watch it. You know, I'm gonna go download, you know, watch a game in on, you know, ESPN Plus or some more random channel, but it's not available to many households. But also, I think it's also a little bit up to us, if you're fans, to really go out of our way a little bit. I've personally never been to a WNBA game, right? I would like to go to one. Right now, we don't have one here. But, you know, next time I'm in New York, I would definitely do that. Or, you know, watch a game. WNBA merchandise is unbelievably amazing. I bought like 5 things, I think, last year. So just support your team. Support what you believe in, and the growth is definitely there, and the opportunities are definitely there. Meghan?
Thank you. Meghan,
no,
up to you, and maybe, go ahead.
Yeah, you filled in most of the gaps. I would say a cool stat is actually the state of California had one of the biggest growth rates after Team USA won that Olympic medal. So there's huge expansion opportunities. I mean, the valuations of these teams too are so low compared to other teams. So, you know, you're not asking for a lot of capital, and there's a lot of excitement around women's sports. It's not just like the young girls that, you know, in the past were historically, oh, here's pink merchandise. It's now the amazing orange and, you know, WNBA hoodie that everyone can't get enough of, right? You see the NBA players rocking it all the time. So I think, you know, getting marketing brains in there, getting funding in there that makes sense, ownerships that are looking, not just checking the box, but how do you grow and scale? Like treating it like a business, because that's what it is. And there's endless potential with how marketable these athletes are, especially in the age of social media. I think they had stats on like followings for, you know, college women athletes who are incredible elite athletes, and they're just killing the males, right? It's just, you know, you can see the potential as they move forward in their career to the NWSL, to women's hockey. And women's hockey is one, I think in the last Olympics, in their time slot, it was #1 for that Canada-US game. So North America is ripe for making money off of women's sports. If there's men watching it, women watching it who have investing dollars, right? It's, I think we should all be looking at that as an actual strategy of how to grow sports, not just women's sports. And I think with hockey too, the more women's hockey people watch, the more people will watch hockey and cross-pollinate. So I'm really excited to see the next 5 years, because I think, especially in hockey, there's a ton of potential.
I'll just jump in and add one comment in motorsports. I gave you the dark side of the drivers, but there is the W Series. And I think your point, Meghan, and your point, Neda and Ali, you referred to it, is the owners, right? So if these teams are undervalued, hey, there's some wealthy, successful women out there. And if you can bring that to the fore, why not? And the W Series in motorsports is an interesting example. We've only got a couple more minutes left. Any last comments? Why don't we do one more last round? We'll start with you, Ali. Any last thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience, or what did we miss?
On what? Yeah, what? Give me a little. I mean, I can talk about
innovation, sports, broadcasting. Take one thing. What would you like to see?
I think I would just like piggyback off of where Meghan left off. And that was just that I do absolutely think there's been a massive shift already, and it is going to only accelerate over the next 5 years. The valuations we're seeing in the NWSL are skyrocketing. And even that, despite what we've seen in the recent weeks and some of the, I would say the negative attention that has been brought upon the league with the women grabbing their power back, this is a massive time for getting the right owners in and getting the right, I would say the belief in the broadcasters and the market. We've already had, to Neda's point, we've already have great sponsors rolling in and coming in, and they haven't blinked. They haven't batted an eyelash at the fact that there has been this negative publicity. So I think this accelerates dramatically over the next 5 years. And we're going to be sitting on, a property that is as mainstream as the NBA, and as like, I'd like to say the WNBA, but we're not there yet. And this is one of the top sports in the women's game. I believe the top team sport in the women's, no disrespect to hockey or NBA or WNBA, but I think for a global audience, we are really well positioned. And it's just, again, a matter of time. And I think getting the right owners and getting the right people to drive the bus is what is really going to take us, I think, to that next level. So I encourage you guys, Neda, Meghan, Susan, to watch some of these games. As you said, we want to see women's sports grow. We want to see women succeed in these industries. And we do have to do our part to support each other. We talk about mentors. We talk about, women supporting women. It's not always the case. And we not acknowledge it, but what are we doing to change it? So I just challenge all of us to, I think, start to pick up that ball.
Thank you. Meghan?
I think the interesting thing about women's sports is, even for soccer to do really well, I think that just creates more of a business case for women's hockey or all these other, women's basketball. So for me, it's about supporting all these leagues that are like pushing forward and just saying, look at how the dollars, the fans, the interactivity, even being more innovative in these leagues, right? There's no preconceived notions of a newer league or, different types of players. So I think you can test different things and actually kind of break the mold of what has been stale in men's sports. So I would say for people on this call, I had to be on this panel with these very strong sports executives that just happen to be women, and that there's a lot of space for everyone that wants to get involved in sports tech. So really think outside, the box of what a traditional career looks like, because there's a lot of movement in technology. Digital sports betting is going to be huge in the next 5 years. So don't feel like you have to follow a traditional path, make your own path.
That's great. Thank you. Neda?
Just going back to what Ali said, and then I tell you about where I focus more on. Honestly, I think I watch more NWSL games than MLS games. And then when it comes to Canada-US football, soccer rivalry, it's crazy. Huge Christine Sinclair fan. The Olympics this year was complicated. So that just creates such a great story that in North American soccer right now, in men's side does not exist. So it's a very interesting part. For me, I think, one of the two areas that I focus on is female fans and women working in the sports industry. Those of you who are in the Bay Area, we do a Women of Teal night every year. Its focus is on women coming more to hockey games. We have a huge fan base of women coming from the Leafs. We actually, percentage-wise, we do have a very high percent of women ticket buyers, season ticket holders, and fans in general. And we also have a very inclusive environment here, and it's just everybody's welcome. But sometimes women don't think, oh, I can just buy a ticket and go to the game, or maybe I don't know what hockey is, which actually that's completely, a misnomer in ways. But it's a fun event. Meghan actually, I think, was in the first one we had. We had a lot of fun here. So I encourage everybody to look at that. Just regardless of the sports, you are welcome here. The experience is great. And then, as Meghan mentioned, especially in the technology world, we do a lot of technology work. I will be hiring soon when it comes to data side. We do have, regardless of what I said at the beginning, that we have cultural problems. Technology work does too, but we do have a lot of great things that happens in the industry, and there's a lot of us who are working to make the cultural aspects of it a lot better. And as Susan said, we've come a long, long way. We still know we can get better, and everybody's working on that. So if you're looking to change industries, if you're interested in data, analytics, technology, I was hiring the IT manager a couple of months ago. Just look at sports organization, not only teams around you, but even entrepreneurs like Meghan, or even sponsors of big companies that work with sports organizations. It is a fun industry, I guarantee you that.
That's great, thank you. And I will just add to that, sports is at the intersection of technology and entertainment and innovation. And so I would just build on what everyone has said already. And it can go into software, can go into gaming, go into simulation, go into equipment in the motorsports industry. The head engineer is for tires at Firestone is a woman. So if you think about your interest in sustainability, pick any box and there's something for you in sports. I think we've run out of time. So let me thank you all for a wonderful panel, and let's hope that we get many more women into the fields, onto the stadium, and into the industry. So thanks so much, everyone.